Oh, Chris Cannon spent thousands of dollars bribing delegates. And here's how this works. Utah's got this little unique system. And you guys have a unique system. Every state in the union has their own unique system. So I'll tell you my little story, but you'll have a story in North Carolina just as good as this. In Utah, they have a caucus system. We meet in caucuses in February. We elect delegates out of our neighbors. They go to Republican convention. If you can convince 60% of those delegates to vote for you, you're the Republican Party candidate. You don't need a primary. It saves a lot of money. Well, they bribe you. When I became a delegate in 2002, I started getting invited to lunch, to dinner. We went to a premiere showing of Shrek. We went to see Peter, Paul and Mary concert. And you get these invitations and you go watch the concert or you watch Shrek, you do whatever, and at the end the candidate gets up and he says, hey, and he wraps himself in the flag and everybody applauds and goes home. And it's just an ongoing thing. I ate very well as a delegate. Jason took a pledge. He wasn't going to buy anything, not even a personal meal. And my first experience with him is he called me up and he says, I'm running against Chris Cannon. And I said, okay, I want to talk to you. Why don't we meet over at Jim's Restaurants right in between us? He says, okay. He says, but I'm not buying your lunch. And I went, okay, I want to talk to you. Let's get together real soon. Chris Cannon was funded primarily by PACs and individuals outside of Utah. 81% of his money came from outside of Utah. Okay. Jason Chaffetz was almost entirely funded by people in Utah. The exceptions were the Fraternal Order of Police. Gave him a donation, and his brother-in-law and sister in Colorado. He ran his campaign, Chris Cannon ran his campaign with perpetually outstanding debt. That's the way things are run these days. Incumbents have very good credit and they'll get what they're printing, they'll get newspaper ads, they'll get billboards, it doesn't matter, because as soon as they get elected, they start holding fundraisers to retire that debt. Okay, and it gets done very quickly and very efficiently. My senator, Bob Bennett, in 2009 held 29 fundraisers. That's 2.5 per month. Every single one of them in Washington, D.C., not one in Utah, with a minimum of $1,000 per person, $2,000 per pack admission charges. He ran 29 of those in Washington, none in Utah. So, meanwhile, Jason made a vow, and he held that vow. He would not spend a penny if he didn't have it. Period, whatever that meant. So we would have fundraising events at his home in his backyard. We'd invite people to come to the fundraiser, and we would meet them in the backyard, and we would have no refreshments because we had no money. It's just the way we're going to do it. Now here's the fun part of this story. 3 months before the primary, March 27th, 2008, they held a debate. And KSL only invited Chris Cannon, the incumbent, and David Levitt, the governor's brother. The governor's brother got into the race 9 months after Jason did, raised $300,000 in 3 months. KSL determined that since Jason had only raised $30,000 at that point and was only showing 4% in the polls, he wasn't a viable candidate. 3 months later, we won the primary 60%, 40%. We went from 4% in the polls to winning 60-40 in the primary with all of these strikes against us. We call it the Chaffetz miracle. And this picture is the picture I chose to represent the miracle. That is one of my favorite pictures, and it's one of the most important pictures. I'm actually, I'm back here with the yellow shirt. And it's hard to see me. My head's not as blown up as it usually is. But this picture represents, in essence, what we did to win this campaign. I want to tell you a little bit about how we won that campaign right now, because what we did there, you can do here. You can do it in South Carolina, you can do it in Georgia, you can do it anywhere. It's not a big secret, and there's nothing special to it. And there's no higher level thinking involved. I went up to Oregon in April and did this presentation, and I explained to them what I'm going to explain to you. They brought me back up in June. The people who had been there the first time said, okay, tell us what's the next step. And I got to tell them, there is no next step. It's just doing this. Just keep doing this over and over again. Here's what we did. First of all, you need to have as much time as you possibly can. And here's what I mean by have as much time as you can. When Jason called me to say he was running against Chris Cannon, it was 2 weeks before Chris was sworn in for his final term of office. He was sworn in on January 20th of 2007. Jason called me and decided he was running 2 weeks before that. And the reason he decided to run that early, and the reason I would encourage all of the patriotic groups to find their candidates early, very, very early, and work with them, is he taught us 3 things. In our first volunteer meeting, he said, you must understand you will never win the money game. So a lot of that information you saw up there are things that Jason opened our eyes to, plus some things that I had already been working on. But he said, you won't win the money game, and if you can't win the money game, you need time. Time is your asset. You need time to replace the money. You can't wait until a year before the election, start running your campaign and start trying to build traction. Because in that year, actually the entire time the incumbent's in office, he's raising money. He's got his war chest built. You need time. Start early. Number two, you can't count on the party to help us. When the party has their incumbent in place, they are not going to help you because they're part of the system too. They are plugged into that system. It works for them. They're not interested in challengers on principle. They're interested in the current system keeping their incumbents in there. So the third thing is we can't count on the media. The media, you can argue they have an agenda or not. It doesn't really matter one way or another. They are not in the business of printing in-depth, balanced stories on the issues, if you've ever noticed. They seem to be more interested in trying to win a Pulitzer Prize for the best written sentence. I mean, it's just, they just throw these little snippets out there with a cute little headline, and that's about the full media coverage you get these days. And since we can't win the money war, I can't buy media like the incumbent can buy media. He says, but I do want to tell you this, and I will tell you that as I've gone around the country, I've learned that this works outside of Utah as well. If you look at the majority of polls, you talk to people in general, you just go talk to people in the mall, and you talk about the things going on. People understand and know that we need a limited government. They know that we need personal accountability. They know we need fiscal responsibility, right? They know we need strong national defense. They know these things, but they don't know of any candidates who are doing it because they're not hearing about it from the media, because the media is only going to talk about how bigoted you are or you know, how you don't like children and things like that. So they don't know that you're for those things. They only see that's in the paper. And for every person sitting here, there are literally tens of thousands out there who never come to a 9/12 meeting or a Tea Party meeting or an iCaucus meeting. They never get the emails that we keep sending around to each other, right? But they're out there, and what do they get? The media, and most of them are turned off. And they're tired of the system. They may choose to vote. They may not. You know, they don't see they have no reason to get energized. He says those people want to hear the message. If we get our message in front of them, people will react to it. And Jason boils it down to 4 things: personal accountability, limited government financial responsibility, strong national defense. Ask him to talk for 30 seconds or 30 hours. He's going to talk about those 4 things, no matter how much time you give him. So it is up to you to make sure that they hear this message. And here's how he says, well, we're going to do it. And he went around the room, and I don't know your names or whatever, but he would say, Frank, will you please hold a meeting somewhere? We call them cottage meetings. Would you hold it in your home, library, wherever? Invite your friends, your neighbors, not the same people that always come to the 9/12 Tea Party groups. The people out there who aren't coming, invite them into your home. I'm going to come and talk to them. And Jennifer and John and Don and Scott, would you do the same thing? And out of that meeting, we had 25 volunteers, February 2007. We got 6 meetings arranged for February. I held one of them. I spent 2 weeks inviting everybody I knew, my friends, my coworkers. I got 14 people to show up. I felt like a failure until the next time I went to one of the meetings and some guy only got 5 people to show up. We had one meeting with 45 people. So it really doesn't matter how many people show up. The bottom line is that you hold these meetings. Because in those meetings, Jason came and he met the people that I had, my 14 friends. And I'm here to tell you this. There is something magical about somebody meeting a candidate because their friend invited them into their home or over to the library to meet that candidate. If you think about it, any of the candidates right near here are running. You go knock on the door, you're walking door to door, and you're trying to introduce yourself to people. The guy opens the door, he's got prejudices you don't know about, he's got preferences you don't know about, he might have a personal opinion about you, or he might not know you from Adam. He could be a cousin of somebody you know. You don't, it's all an unknown right now. And all he wants to do is shut the door and get back to his baseball game or get back to American Idol. He doesn't want you on his doorstep. And you're trying to convince him that that incumbent is stealing him blind and that you need to vote for me, and you try to do this in 15 seconds, you obviously know how well that works. If you're an incumbent going door to door, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But if that exact same person is meeting the candidate because you invited him and he's your coworker and you've invited him and he's sitting right here and he's now talking to him and he's here and you're having some refreshments that you put together, there's a bond. You get past all of that. And all this guy knows is I'm listening, wow, this guy is talking about everything that I believe in, and I didn't realize we had any candidates like this, and my friend Jim, of course, is supporting him. I like this guy. You've just now created a convert that you cannot create. You can't create that bond any other way. You can spend all the money you want. You can put billboards up. You can send expensive flyers in the mail. 95% of them are going to go in the garbage without being read. You can do whatever you want to do. you're not going to make a bond like if you invite them into your home, into a cottage meeting. That's why that picture is so important. That was one of our more successful meetings later in the campaign, where we had to rent out a kind of, it's like the rec center at one of the apartment complexes of Connie Smith's house. We had to have that for that many people. And remember, we started with, my meeting had 14 people, the one had 5. There's about 100-some people that came to this one by the time we got to this meeting. And what we did, and you log this in your brain, because if you're going to take the time to have a meeting, and you're going to take the time to invite the candidate, you're going to take the time to invite your friends, Jason said you will never hold a meeting unless we do 3 things. Number 1, we will ask, is there anybody here now that you've met Jason, would you volunteer, be a volunteer for the campaign when they need some help? 80% of the people at every meeting are signing up. Is there any, we can't win the money war, on the other hand, but we do, it takes money. It takes money to drive around, it takes money to run a campaign. If you can donate anything, it'd be greatly appreciated. Sometimes we'd raise $400 or $500 at a meeting. Sometimes we'd raise less than 100. Didn't really matter. And I'll tell you why it doesn't matter in just a second. And the third thing we're going to do is we're going to ask, is there anybody here who could do a meeting just like this one in your home or in your library? And it's like multi-level marketing without annoying your parents. And you actually have something of value that's not going to cost people money, and you don't have to worry about downlines, but it just expands like that. And every time we'd have a meeting, we'd have people and we'd start doing more and more meetings. It got to the point where we could not possibly get Jason to all of the meetings. We were having too many meetings scheduled. We couldn't get all the people there. And that's when we started doing things like this, where we started renting out rec centers because we knew we were going to get a large audience. Or when you look at the Independence Caucus articles on that DVD, those all started as PowerPoints that I put together because I'd have somebody say, I'd like to have a meeting for Jason. I can do it next Saturday, and we go, Jason can't be there. He's got a full schedule. But if you want to hold the meeting, I'll come. Or even if I can't make it, I'll give you this PowerPoint. Let's go over the PowerPoint. Show the people the PowerPoint. And they would show the people the PowerPoint. So in some cases, you can't even get to the candidate to everything. But the bottom line is, as that went on, this is why it doesn't matter how much money you raise. If you get somebody to say, yeah, I'll be a volunteer, and they sign that list, that sign-up list, or you get them to donate $1, they have now bought and married your candidate. There is a bond there that I don't care how much money the incumbent spends. I'm a Jason Chaffetz volunteer. I wear that with pride, That's my candidate. I donated money to him. Doesn't matter if it's $1 or $5. You've got to vote that the incumbent cannot shake no matter how much money he spends. Every group can do this. And again, there's no magic pill to this. It's just doing it. Setting up the meetings and doing it. In Utah, Jason Chaffetz started 2 weeks before the incumbent was signed in. No other candidate announced until 9 months later. And in that 9 months, we built our 1,000 volunteer base. And by that time the governor's brother got into the race, there was no way he could, because he was running as the grassroots candidate, there was no way he could get that base. We had that base. We built that base over 9 months. Okay? And that's what you guys can do and need to do. You need to build that base on a one-on-one contact, because there's no other way that the people out there who don't come to these meetings are going to know that your candidate is not just somebody else who's just saying the words, because that's what they're used to. Yeah, that guy's running, Smith, I think, is the guy that I hear about here. The one thing I hear, I have to tell you, I've been talking about to people other reasons, I keep hearing he's an empty suit. Nobody's excited about him, but he's your candidate. Well, unfortunately, good candidates, those same people, there's a lot of people who think the same thing about the good candidates. They just don't know them. They've never met them. It's up to you to make sure they meet them. You got to do that. That's going to be the trick. Now, I want to tell you about how to lose an election as a 9/12 and Tea Party group, because we learned how to do that too. In Indiana, Evan Bayh was the incumbent senator, and Evan and his father Birch together were the Republican senator from the Democratic senator from Indiana for close to 80 years between the two of them. Okay, and Evan voted for TARP, and there was a backlash in Indiana, and he voted for health care. There was a backlash in Indiana. Things weren't looking as good for him as they had in the past. He decided not to run. The only candidate in the race at that time on the Republican side was a guy named Richard Bainey, who had organized the April 15th Tea Party meeting in Indianapolis. And we had endorsed Richard. He was the only candidate running. And as soon as Evan Bayh said he wasn't going to run, the Republican Party establishment said, wow, that's an open seat. Let's bring Dan Coates home. Now, Dan Coates was a representative in Indiana for 12 years, and then he voluntarily left and went to Washington and started a lobbying firm. He became one of the largest lobbying firms in Washington. Okay?